Morning, Pa. I'm going to add to your backlog of stuff to listen to when you're home from Disney. All right, we're still in the middle of the Mosiah reform. But right now we are on acquiring the Jaredite interpreters. Or the Jaredite plates. Let me go through this. The Jaredite, I think we'd read that one. Ooh, I wonder if I can get through the end of this chapter. That way we can get to the book of Benjamin. Oof, we're cramming through this. All right. Yeah, no, I haven't read that. All right. Acquiring the Jaredite interpreters. The origin of the interpreters occurs when the brother of Jared created clear white stones from molten rock, took them to the top of Mount Shelem, and requested that the Lord touch them with his finger. In return, the Lord spoke to him from a cloud through the veil, and then reached through the veil to touch the stones. As he did so, the brother of Jared saw the Lord's finger. The Lord then asked him a series of questions, beginning with what he saw, to test the brother of Jared's faith and knowledge. When he passed the test, the Lord then brought him into his presence and declared him redeemed from the primordial fall of Adam and Eve. In this process, the Lord also gave the brother of Jared 2 white stones, the interpreters. That's Ether 3:23. Footnote. The brother of Jared receiving white stones from Christ evokes the promise of Christ in Revelation 2:17. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth save he that receiveth it. See also Doctrine and Covenants 130, 10 through 11. This account shares several elements with Lapham's narrative of a Nephite acquiring the interpreters. Each is the story of a man's initiation as a seer, in which the incident seer approaches the divine presence at the veil in a holy place, whether the physical veil on Mount Shelem or the physical veil of the Nephite tabernacle on the hill north of Shiloh. In each case, the man brings stones. Oh, really? Metaphysical on the veil of Mount Shelem. So, metaphysical stones. Oh, the metaphysical veil on Mount Shelem and the physical veil of the Nephite tabernacle on the hill north of Shiloh. In each case, the man brings stones to God, and God makes inquiries. In one case, about his own hand, and in the other, about what's in the man's hand. Footnote, the next event in the brother of Jared's account is that he sees God, which seems likely in the event that Mosiah the first account as well, based on context, parallel with brother of Jared account and the statement by Harris looking into the interpreters with seeing God. For Martin Harris' statement, see Martin Harris and Joel Tiffany's interview, Early Mormon Documents. And for further discussion of this text, see Bradley's American Proto-Zionism in the Book of Lehi. So, interesting. And in each, the man seeks wisdom by revelation from the other side of the veil. The Nephite seer makes this explicit, responding when asked what the sacred object in his hand is. He did not know, but had come to inquire. So one was the brother of Jared asking for the stones to be touched, and he saw, asking about his own hand. And then Mosiah the first, having found the interpreters on Mount Shelem, asking God, what is this thing? He did not know, but he came to inquire. See Lapham's interview. Thus, both narratives relate parallel episodes in the history of the interpreters and the New World seers who have used them. Together they read naturally as 2 installments in the same larger narrative. The Jaredite plates. Given that the Jaredite interpreters were to be sealed with the brother of Jared's record, One would assume that when Mosiah the first recovered the interpreters, he also recovered the brother of Jared's golden plates. This assumption, however, is complicated, with there being one passage in our present Book of Mormon that potentially refutes this idea, and another that supports it. In the Book of Mosiah, Limhi tells Ammon the first of his people finding 24 plates from which Moroni would eventually abridge the Book of Ether. That's Mosiah 8, 7 through 9, and Ether 1 through 2, and also chapter 15, 33. If the brother of Jared's record is understood to be part of those plates found by Limhi's people, this would indicate that Mosiah I could not have found the brother of Jared's record with the interpreters. However, the 24 plates are exactly said to have been the record kept by the final Jaredite prophet Ether, and not the sealed record created by the first Jaredite prophet, the brother of Jared. Thus, in the final chapter of the book of Ether, Moroni writes, "And the Lord spake unto Ether, and said unto him, Go forth. And he went forth, and he finished his record, and 100th part I have not written. And he hid them in a manner that the people of Limhi did find them." Ether 15:33. And in the opening of his abridgment of that record, Moroni begins, "And now I, Moroni, proceed to give an account of those ancient inhabitants who were destroyed by the hand of the Lord upon the face of this north country. And I take mine account from the 24 plates which were found by the people of Limhi, which is called the Book of Ether, that he wrote this record was Ether, and he was a descendant of Coriantor, Ether 1 through 2, and also verse 6. Well, Moroni had access to both the interpreters and the brother of Jared's record, Ether 4 through 5. It's clear from the passages above that they were distinct from Ether's 24 plates found by Limhi's people. No indication is made of Ether's record being sealed, or of Ether having the interpreters. However, it is made clear that the brother of Jared's record was not only sealed, but that the interpreters were sealed with them, so that the record could be translated at some point. "And behold, these 2 stones will I give unto thee, and ye shall seal them up also with the things which ye shall write. For behold, the language which ye shall write I have confounded. Wherefore I will cause in mine own due time that these stones shall magnify to the eyes of men these things which ye shall write. And the Lord said unto him, Write the things, and seal them up, and I will show them in mine own due time unto the children of men. And it came to pass that the Lord commanded him that he should seal up the 2 stones which he had received, and show them not, until the Lord should show them unto the children of men." That's Ether 3, 23 through 24, and 27 through 28. When the 24 plates of Ether were recovered by Limhi's people, the interpreters were not with those plates. They had already been recovered and were held by the Nephite king in Zarahemla. That's Mosiah 8, 13 through 19. Given that the interpreters were sealed up with the brother of Jared's record, with the express purpose of translating that record, it should be clear that Mosiah I acquired it with the brother of Jared's record, along with the interpreters that were sealed with it. Aha! So there's one big record of the Jaredites, and that's where the interpreters were, and they probably found it in this mountain, Mount Shelem. And the 24 plates were found later when Limhi's people were coming back, or no, they were kind of getting the stuff. If it's Limhi, then that's the son of King Noah, if I remember right. Maybe it was when they were traveling back, or when they were wandering in the wilderness looking for Zarahemla. I wonder if it's also in Mount Shelem that they just kind of repeated using that same spot, but found more. But that's interesting. I didn't know that. All right, the people of Moloch. The destination of Mosiah I's exodus was another promised land north of the original land of Nephi, the land of Zarahemla. There, Mosiah I encountered the Mulekites, or people of Zarahemla, named after their last king. And who were the Mulekites, and how did they get there? Amalek gives the thinnest the tiniest thumbnail sketch of their history. They were called the people of Zarahemla. Behold, it came to pass that Mosiah discovered that the people of Zarahemla came out from Jerusalem at the time that Zedekiah, king of Judah, was carried away captive into Babylon. And they journeyed in the wilderness and were brought by the hand of the Lord across the great waters into the land where Mosiah discovered them. And they had dwelt there from that time forth. See Omni 1, 14 through 16. Oh, and that also reminds me, there was a Ward radio discussion that was actually really cool, talking about this group of Africans that are like, no, we are children of Israel. We definitely are. What happened is that we left Jerusalem after it being sacked. We were being led by God. We were told to go upon the waters. Our barge, or our ship, got taken over by a storm. So we wrecked off the coast of Africa here, kind of around the Horn of Africa. They hadn't come around the south side, if I remember right. And they're like, yeah, and we tried to live the law of Moses, and we kept ourselves as separate as we could from the native peoples, and been here ever since. And funny enough, they have genetic markers of being from Israel. And so, it could be that they were part of this Mulekite exodus. And so, but they were just part of the crew, but that crew got shipwrecked. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, Amalek notes that Zarahemla's people, like the Nephites, had come out of Jerusalem at the time of Zedekiah, but he doesn't mention their founder or his connection with Zedekiah. Only later in the Book of Mormon, it is reported that King Zarahemla was a descendant of Mulek, who was a son of Zedekiah, and the only one of the sons of Zedekiah to have survived the second Babylonian invasion by Nebuchadnezzar II. That's Mosiah 25:2 and Helaman 8:21. Mulek is mentioned abruptly and without explanation for the first time in Mosiah 25:2. Royal Skousen has posited that this sudden reference to Mulek might indicate that the now lost portions of the original text mentioned this Mulek. See Skousen's analysis of textual variants. Fortunately, there is further information on Mulek. There is the correct spelling of his name, which has implications for the understanding of Mulek's relationship with Zedekiah. Second, there is a Mulek narrative from the lost pages reported by Martin Harris. Martin Harris's brother Emmer. Mulek, according to Royal Skousen, based on the analysis of the Book of Mormon manuscripts, quote, the actual name for the surviving son of King Zedekiah was Mulek, not Mulek. That's the differences in the spelling, which is M-U-L-O-C-H, not M-U-L-E-K. The implication of being that Zedekiah named his son after the pagan god Mulek, and that they sacrificed children, Molech. Let me start that whole quote over again. The actual name for the surviving son of King Zedekiah was Mulech, M-U-L-O-C-H, not M-U-L-E-K, Mulek. The implication being that Zedekiah named his son after the pagan god Moloch, that they sacrificed their children to, thus suggesting a rather ominous aspect to King Zedekiah's character. Footnote of this is that this comes from Royal Skousen, the original text of the Book of Mormon, and its publication by Yale University Press. When Moloch's name is so closely resembling the name of the idolatrous god forbidden to the Israelites and virtually identical in Hebrew script, why would Zedekiah, the Jewish king, give his child that name? Idolatry in Jerusalem. Zedekiah's punishment by the invading Nebuchadnezzar II included making him witness the murder of his children before having his own eyes removed. 2 Kings 25:7. This, of course, raises the question of how one of his sons would have survived. A solution to this problem from the lost pages comes to us in a sermon by Martin Harris's brother, Emmer Harris. Emmer delivered this narrative in the conference of the Utah Stake in Provo on April 6, 1856, when he was asked to speak on the founding of the church and the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. His account is recorded in the Utah Stake Minutes, a portion of which is published here for the first time. Original sources. Woo! Quote, "Now I will tell you the history of those that were lost. When the king from Jerusalem, Zedekiah, had his eyes put out, but his son Mulek, with some others of the royal family, hid themselves, and on coming out of their hiding place, they found 4 females of the royal family who also had hid themselves from the wrath of the king. They were married together, there being 4 males and 4 females. They were found in this country in the south part. When they were found, they had become a small tribe. Consequently, when I compared the sayings of the Bible and the Book of Mormon, I found them to agree. For the things spoken of in the Bible, I found more fully spoken of in the Book of Mormon." And that's the end of the quote. That was General Minutes, April 6, 1856, Provo, Utah Central Stake. Spelling and punctuation updated for clarity. Well, I appreciate it. I mean, it was probably done in shorthand. Emmer implies that he acquired this detailed information from Martin, the person who scribed for and last possessed the lost pages. Indeed, it is possible that Emmer Harris read the story from the lost manuscript itself. When his brother Martin borrowed the manuscript, he pledged to show it only to 5 members of his immediate family, yet Martin actually showed the manuscript to a wider audience, which likely included his own brother, since he showed it to various friends and neighbors. Even if Emmer did not read the manuscript himself, he could have heard its contents from his brother Martin and other close family members who had seen the manuscript. His parents, Nathan and Rhonda Lapham Harris, his brother preserved, his sister-in-law, that's his name, is preserved, his sister-in-law, Lucy Harris, and his first cousin, Polly Harris Cobb. While Emmer gives only a few details of the Moloch story from the lost manuscript, these are more than we have in the published Book of Mormon. While the Book of Mormon makes clear that Moloch was not killed by the Babylonians, it is not clear how he, unlike his siblings, avoided this fate. Emmer places Moloch in Jerusalem at the time his father was captured by the Babylonian Nebuchadnezzar II, but says that Moloch escaped by hiding with the others of the royal family. Providentially, 4 males of David's line found 4 females of the royal family as they hid from the wrath of the king, presumably Nebuchadnezzar II. However, another possibility is that Emmer was saying that Moloch and the other 7 royals had hidden from King Zedekiah. While this is a less obvious reading, it has intriguing possibilities for how Moloch escaped while his siblings were slaughtered. After Zedekiah imprisoned Jeremiah, the latter issued an oracle addressed explicitly to Zedekiah that holds the king blameworthy for Jewish worship of Moloch, chillingly portending to the soon-to-be blinded Zedekiah's encounter with King of Babylon. "His eyes shall behold his eyes," Jeremiah thunders. Quote, "They, their kings, their princes, their priests, and their prophets, and the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, they built the high places of Baal to cause their sons and daughters to pass through the fire unto Molech, which I commanded them not. Neither came it into my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin." Jeremiah 32:4 and also verses 32 and 35. Taking up the negative implication of Zedekiah naming a child Moloch, like the god who demanded the sacrifice of one's children, anyone named after Moloch might have been marked for sacrifice to the bloodthirsty deity. If King Zedekiah was desperate to petition divine aid from Israel's God or any other god, then Molech might have been, I'm still going to say Mulek, even though his name is Molech, because it's so close to Moloch, the god. So then Mulek might have been chosen as an offering to stop the impending threat of Nebuchadnezzar. Furthermore, if Mulek hid himself to avoid sacrifice by either Nebuchadnezzar or by his own father, he would not have been present with his family when Nebuchadnezzar had Zedekiah's children put to death. Adding to the drama, this might also suggest dissension in the royal household, with some members siding with the prophet Jeremiah, who advocated that Zedekiah keep his covenant with Nebuchadnezzar, and others who supported Zedekiah's conspiracy against the Babylonian king. Regardless of the reason for their hiding, 4 male royals and 4 female royals provide the ideological narrative for the Mulekite people. The Mulekites were thus a regal people, a nation raised up to the lineage of King David. Emmer's account also tacitly communicates an image echoing the story of Noah, 8 souls on a boat, 4 men and 4 women, whose role will be to populate the land after divine destruction. Genesis 8:15 through 18 and 1 Peter 3:20. Uniting the Nephite and Mulekites. Among the more significant elements of Mosiah I and the Mulekites' narrative in the lost manuscript is an explanation of how the Nephite and Mulekite peoples joined together under Mosiah I's reign to form a combined Nephite-Mulekite nation. Amaleki tells us, quote, "Hi, cutie, I'm reading." Dear, what? Can you get that to me in a minute? Yes, but dear, please, you've got to not interrupt me. Where? It's already signed by Mom.
No, that's
You better. And shut my door, please. I love my daughter. Oh well. Among the more significant elements of Mosiah I's Amalekites narrative is the lost manuscript. It's the explanation of how the Nephite and Amalekite peoples joined together under Mosiah I's reign to form the combined Nephite-Amalekite nation. Amaleki tells us, quote, "And they discovered a people who were called the people of Zarahemla. Now there was great rejoicing among the people of Zarahemla, and also Zarahemla did rejoice exceedingly, because the Lord had sent the people of Mosiah with the brass plates which contained the record of the Jews. And at the time that Mosiah discovered them, they had become exceedingly numerous. Nevertheless, they had had many wars and serious contentions, and had fallen by the sword from time to time, and their language had become corrupted, and they had brought no records with them. And they denied the being of their Creator. And Mosiah, nor the people of Mosiah, could understand them. But it came to pass that Mosiah caused that they should be taught in his language. And it came to pass that after they were taught in the language of Mosiah, Zarahemla gave a genealogy of his fathers according to his memory. And they are written, but not in these plates. And it came to pass that the people of Zarahemla and of Mosiah did unite together. And Mosiah was appointed to be their king." Omni 1:14 and 17 through 19. How did the leader of a wandering Nephite band ascend the throne over a foreign nation? Mosiah I and the Nephites came to the land of Zarahemla as refugees from the land of Nephi. And King Zarahemla is the established monarch over a settled people, much more numerous than Mosiah I's group, in a land that bears his name. Mosiah 25:2-3. Yet, when Mosiah I's and Zarahemla's peoples unite, it is Mosiah I, the leader of the refugees, not Zarahemla, the sitting king, who ends up as king over the combined nation in Zarahemla's land. The selection of Mosiah I as king becomes more puzzling if King Zarahemla is the son of the house of David, the Hebrew Bible's everlasting and divinely ordained dynasty. 2 Chronicles 13:5. The The four founding fathers and four founding mothers of the Mulekite nation, identified by Emmer Harris as of the royal family, were thus all members of David's royal house, hereditary kings and queens, making Zarahemla the heir of David, ruling over the heirs of David. The Mulekites were a royal nation ruled by one who could claim to be a king of kings. So why does it happen that the people of Zarahemla and of Mosiah did unite together, and Mosiah was appointed to be their king? Omni 119. Footnote: the dominance of the incoming, literate, monotheistic group suggests colonialism. However, the dominance of the less powerful group suggests a kind of reverse colonialism. Without more of the lost Mosiah I narrative, we can only guess at partial and provisional insights and answers. Three likely factors are Mosiah I's lineage, his supernatural power, and the Nephites' maintenance of their language and scripture. I would think that it could also be that if Mosiah I married into Zarahemla's family, another possibility, but we'll see what he says. First, while the king Zarahemla is a descendant of Judah through David, Mosiah I is a descendant of Joseph through Nephi, the David of Joseph's line, and possessor of Joseph's heirloom sword. In the new promised land, this is the superior qualification. On one hand, the Hebrew Bible presents the tribe of Judah as the tribe from which the king would come. That's Genesis 49:10, and David as the divinely appointed king over Israel's promised land. That's 1 Samuel 16:1-13. On the other hand, the Book of Mormon presents the Americas as a promised land for the seed of Joseph, just as Judea was for the seed of Judah. That's Jacob 2:25. Thus, the resurrected Jesus tells his 12 Nephite disciples that the Nephites are a remnant of the house of Joseph, and this is the land of your inheritance. That's 3 Nephi 15:12. The new promised land had been given by divine covenant to Lehi and Nephi. See 1 Nephi 2:20 and 4:14, and also 5:5. So, while Zarahemla had lineal claim to kingship in the old promised land, the Nephites had lineal claim to rule in the new promised land, inherited by Mosiah I. Second, even before his exodus, Mosiah I had already proven his prophetic abilities, that's Omni 1:12-13. With the acquisition of the divine interpreters, he now possessed a high gift from God, a gift which is greater no man can have except he should possess the power of God, Mosiah 8:16-20. Perhaps it was this gift that enabled him to reach out and eventually understand the Mulekites in a way that they could not in return. Sorry, I was thinking about the interpreters and their shape. And yeah, that would be interesting. Sorry, I'm mixing scientific thought with religious stuff, which I have. It's pure science fiction going through my head. Like, really pure science fiction, which is dumb. I'll explain in a moment. So perhaps it was the gift that enabled them to reach out and eventually understand the Mulekites in a way that they could not in return. Finally, immediately preceding Amaleki's report of Mosiah I being made king over the united people, he provides the reason why these two kingdoms that came out of Jerusalem were unable to easily communicate. Quote, at the time that Mosiah discovered them, their language had become corrupted, and that they had brought no records with them, and they denied the being of their creator, and Mosiah, nor the people of Mosiah could understand them. That's Omni 1:17. With this barrier in place, it was Mosiah I who had the wisdom to teach the Mulekites the Nephites' language so they could better associate one with another. Now, having a shared language, they did unite together, and Mosiah was appointed to be their king. No longer separate tribes of Joseph and Judah, but one fold under one shepherd. That's Ezekiel 37:15-24. So just ascent to the throne through education and prosperity through education. And that's pretty darn good. Mosiah and Messiah. Now, let's see how long this one is. We'll do this one more. And then I gotta get ready for my work. What I was thinking of is how the interpreters are described as being a very powerful relic from God, and that unless you literally had the power of God, there's not much more that could be more cool and powerful. And since they're described as being able to see both everything in the past and everything in the future, and you can be a seer by figuring out, what's meant and what is said, then my completely bunk, silly, stupid sci-fi thought was, what if you had, everyone talks about a tesseract, like you get that thanks to the Marvel movies everywhere, where they show that cube in that special way, but where it's technically, if you think of a regular three-dimensional cube, and then you have a cube attached to every side of it, and you folded those cubes over each other into a single area, you'd get a fourth dimensional cube. The reason why that holds is if you cut a cube out into its constituent squares, it makes this cross shape. And all that is two-dimensional squares folding up into a perpendicular plane to then make a regular cube. So if you similarly take cubes and put it on every side of it in a type of cross, where you have one on every side, so it's kind of like that, it looks like a cross, but then you add another tail on it, just like you would for the squares to make a cube. Well, you do that with the cubes to make a hypercube. It's really interesting. They have these animations online, and if you basically, and that's the weird part, is the animations try and show what it kind of would look like in our three-dimensional space, because it would be a shadow of the actual hypercube in our three-dimensional space. But they do the shadow on a two-dimensional because you're looking on the screen. Anyway, but it shows the cubes kind of folding up and around the original interior cube to then make this hypercube in four-dimensional space. And it's fascinating to see how that works out. But what I was thinking is, what if you had a higher dimensional object that instead worked through time? Like, if you remember in Interstellar, how he was in this tesseract space or fourth dimensional space, and he could literally move in 3 dimensions to get to 2 different times in one spot. And I was thinking, what if you had something like that, where if you've ever read Flatland, the idea is, what if you took a sphere and you put it through a 2-dimensional world? For them, it would start as a dot, expand real quick into this large circle, and then come back down and be a dot again. And if you did that with a higher dimensional sphere, we'd see a dot, it would come into being a larger sphere and then come back out. And for them, because they're in some perpendicular dimension that we can't see, touch, or feel because we're stuck in 3 dimensions, we would just see it appear and disappear, and they can literally see through us, the inside of us and outside of us, all of us, that kind of thing. So if you remember Flatland, and you take the idea of something that's like a tesseract, but what if you did it with time? What if you had a slice of a tesseract in this world in the shape of a small triangular stones that are in silver bows? And so when you're looking through those, you're literally able to look through time. Just pure science fiction nonsense. It'd be cool. It's a cool idea. But, yeah. I would not apply that to religious things, not unless God himself sat there and said, yeah, go for it. But anyways, that was my weird kind of mixing science with religious relics things. It's kind of like if you tried to you found out that it's like if you took Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and applied scientific stuff that the cup was a special catalyst that allowed for the water inside of it to act as a type of genetic changing thing that allowed the alleles at the end of your genetic code to be lengthened again so that you can retain your youth for longer. Something like that. It's just applying, okay, well, here's the artifact and what it does, and what would be a cool science fiction-y kind of way of saying something like that happens. It's like adding transporters to angels. It's like you're being a dingus when you're doing something like that. Anyways, so Mosiah and Messiah. The Book of Mormon, both our present text and the Lost Pages, opens up with a vision of a singular Messiah that all others would prefigure. See 1 Nephi 1:19. With this founding vision, the primary theme throughout the Book of Mormon is the anticipation of such a Messiah. In fact, as Moroni wrote on the very last leaf of the Golden Plates, one of the central purposes of the record was to the convincing of the Jew and Gentile that Jesus is the Christ, Messiah, title page. Thus, there is nary a story or element in the Book of Mormon that does not pursue Nephi's goal to write to persuade our children and also our brethren to believe in Christ, 2 Nephi 25:23. With this Nephite tradition of anticipating the Messiah, it would make sense that the religious leaders among them would see themselves as modeling Christ in one way or another. Thus we see Alma preach that the high priests after the order of Melchizedek were signposts pointing to a Messiah or Christ. These priests were ordained in a manner that thereby the people might know in what manner to look forward to his Son for redemption. Alma 13:2. It is within this tradition of messianic topology that Mosiah the First's prefiguring of Christ becomes clear: prophet, priest, and king. Mosiah the First began not as a king, but as a prophet. Like Lehi and Jeremiah, he was one warned by God of a coming destruction and who warned others. Upon acquisition of the Jaredite interpreters, Mosiah the First added the role of priest. Like the biblical high priests, he utilized the Nephite Urim and Thummim in the tabernacle to divine the will of God. Although a parallel figure to Aaron, Mosiah the First was not a Levitical priest. Rather, he was a high priest after the order of the Son of God, or after the order of Melchizedek, JST Hebrews 7:3, or Doctrine and Covenants 107:2-4, thus adding an additional layer pointing to Christ as the great high priest. Finally, in addition to the prophet and priest, Mosiah the First was chosen as king. Thus, perhaps for the first time since Nephi, the people of the Promised Land had a righteous leader serving them as prophet, priest, and king. Anointed one. Following the precedent of Nephi anointing his successor, Mosiah the First would have been anointed king. Jacob 1:19. This Nephite practice of continuing kings by anointing echoes the Hebraic practice and prefigures Christ by evoking the very meaning of Messiah. The Hebrew word Mashiach and Greek Christos both means anointed. As a prophet like Jeremiah, a priest like Aaron and Melchizedek, and an anointed king like the dynastic founder David and temple builder Solomon, Mosiah the First joins such greats as Moses, Nephi, and Joseph Smith in combining these roles and thereby typologically prefiguring the divine prophet, priest, king, and anointed Jesus. Footnote: Joseph Smith's diary, kept by his private secretary Willard Richards, describes his own advance through these offices. We learn in a priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, prophet, priest, and king, and I will advance from prophet to priest, and then to king, not in the kingdom of this earth, but the kingdom of the Most High God. See Journal, December of 1842, June 1844, Book 3, July 15th, 1843 through 29, February 1844. For exposition of this sermon in the context of Joseph Smith's Nauvoo Reformation, modeled on those of Josiah and Mosiah I, see Don Bradley, The Grand Fundamental Principles of Mormonism, Joseph Smith's Unfinished Reformation. True to its meaning, anointed, the Hebrew word Mashiach, is used in the Bible with surprisingly wide application to people and objects anointed with sacred oil, including prophets, priests, and kings, and also the holy things of the temple, the altar, the sacred vessels, the shewbread as an anointed prophet, priest, and king who saved his people from destruction and brought another people back to remembrance of their God. Mosiah I pointed to the Messiah who would save all from eternal death. It is fitting then, and perhaps intentional, that his name would bear such similarity to that of the anticipated Messiah Lehi learned of in vision, and who is his own son Benjamin would learn of by an angel. That's Mosiah 3, 2 through 11. The name Mosiah was seen by Joseph Smith as similar to Messiah, to the point that he pronounced and spelled them identically. Footnote, see the source and discussion in the note 2 of this chapter. Yeah. Mosiah I's son, Benjamin, used that similarity at his own son, Mosiah II's anointing as king to teach his people. It is here that Benjamin's son and father of Mosiah's urged the Nephites, the people of Mosiah 1:10, to take on the name that is Messiah, in translation, Christ. Quote, and now these are the words which King Benjamin desired of them. And therefore he said unto them, Ye have spoken the words that I desired, and the covenant which ye have made is a righteous covenant. And now, because of the covenant which ye have made, ye shall be called the children of Christ, his sons and his daughters. Mosiah 5, 6 through 7. Following this request, there was not one soul, except it were little children, but who had entered into the covenant, that they had taken upon them the name of Christ. Mosiah 6, 2. Next is acquiring the relics. I'm going to have to stop here. But, yeah. It makes sense that, okay, if this land is for the inheritance of Mosiah and his children, or not Mosiah, but of Joseph and his children, that's one claim to the throne. His education and his powers as a prophet and priest would also be another reason. And then colonialism? Would they have had better fighting ability? I don't think it's colonialism in the strictest sense, where they come in and they're stronger and better than the people they're conquering. I really think that, like you said, it's kind of reverse colonialism, where these are less able refugees fleeing from the land of Nephi, but because of their superior knowledge and then spiritual gifts from God. Plus, it also could be that through that learning and education, that they basically say, oh, well, yeah, you guys are smarter and you have these records and you can show all this, and according to us, we're this far back and, it makes sense, and you're the one who preserved the record. But if this land is for the land of Joseph, then, well, again, there is zero at all evidence of him marrying into the Amalekites to also become king. But the reason that comes to mind for me is because in the Book of Mormon, there is kind of a tradition of that. I mean, I remember, oh God, what's his freaking name? I always forget it. It's the really, really, really bad dude, like amazingly, horribly, awful bad dude in the Book of Mormon, who, he's one of these guys during the time of King, well, not King, but in the time of the judges when Captain Moroni was around. And he wants to become king. And so he's trying to persuade and corrupt all these other judges and friends to have him be held up as the king. And Moroni comes in and says, no, we're not doing this. And he starts capturing everyone. And so him and his friends flee, and then his only closest inner circle flees, so everyone gets captured. And only him leaves. And then he goes to the Nephites, stirs them up to anger. He, through his cunning, basically says, no, I'll be second in command. Just let's go after the Nephites. And they're like, half of them are like, no, we just got our butts kicked. Why in the world would we want to go after the Nephites? And so he's like, don't worry. Let's go and collect this other army, and we'll calm it all down. And then he poisons his captain, and then he gets the armies combined, and then he poisons the captains, and then because he's the leader of the army, he then gets to, he has the assassination of the king, and so he then is, because of his position of power over the army, marries the queen, so he himself becomes king. He was a Nephite, now he's king of the Lamanites through marriage and cunning, and he's a slime ball. I always forget his name, but maybe that's just because I always say I forget his name, and so every time I try and remember it, I try not to. But he's just awful. And so you can see in certain traditions that way. And then the same thing happened when Ammon II goes to King Limhi, if I remember right. Yeah, King Limhi. The one where, so Ammon is watching over the flocks of the king. He slays the other Lamanites who likes to scatter the king's flocks, and the king's really impressed and doesn't know what to say. And so Ammon teaches him about Jesus Christ and the gospel, and he becomes converted. Then they confront his dad, and he gets converted eventually. But in that whole story, one of the things that is done is when Ammon arrives, Ammon is a prince of the Nephites because he was the son of Mosiah II. And so I suspect that when he's like, no, I want to join with the Lamanites, one of the first things he's offered is the daughter of Limhi. I mean, he's not the kingly king because Limhi has his own dad who's king. So, but still, I mean, that's a notch in your belt to sit there and say, see, this Nephite prince wants to come, well, he's part of the family. So between these couple of stories, it shows that there is some sort of tradition of, well, you can merge families and attain rank and power through marriage. And so I know Don Bradley doesn't posit that idea, but I figure that's another reasonable one, that both Zarahemla, the king, and Mosiah I know that, okay, well, Mosiah is a prophet and a priest and a rightful son of Joseph in the land. And if Zarahemla is the king and he goes, well, this guy is really, really cool and very beneficial, and especially I'd like him as a son-in-law, why not have him marry in and he becomes king? That seems very natural and just an outgrowth of the situation. There is zero for that in any text or anything else, because I'm not a scholar, but that would make the most sense to me. It's kind of like when I sit here and think about This is another scriptural one where this is what makes sense in my mind, but I don't know if it has any precedence or not, because Daniel and his buddies, back when they were taken over in the Babylonian captivity, they were called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? And they were taught to be in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. And to me, I suspect they were eunuchs. And I suspect that they were, because they don't talk about Daniel having a wife or other things like that. And I can't remember if there was something else that kind of nods towards the idea that he's a eunuch. But that they were raised to basically be the grease between the wheels of, here's the, Babylonian Empire that took over the Israelite nation, and they get to be the, see, look, we're playing nice. They're courtiers, and that way they can share with all the Hebrew kids, this is what the king wants, and so you get to take what the king says, kind of thing. Well, what if Moses was the same way? That, yeah, there was some sort of prophecy, and so they were killing all the Hebrew children, but Moses was saved in the reeds, and the reason he was able to be preserved was not because, like, it's depicted in the Ten Commandments, or like it was depicted in the Prince of Egypt. I mean, they have these wonderful, like, brotherly back and forth that makes great drama for Hollywood. But what if instead Moses was like a courtier, that once again he was being raised in the palace, but not as literal, like, oh, well, here's your adopted brother Moses. But what if he was a courtier? So he knew he was Israelite. He knew that he was, the son of, what's her name? Oh, another name that I need to look up. But he was preserved by the daughter of Pharaoh. And he was kind of raised as an Egyptian because he didn't know Hebrew well. So instead of being like a stutterer, I guess like Enoch was, that Moses was slow of speech because he just didn't know Hebrew. But he knew he was Hebrew because, I mean, that was evident when he, killed that slave master and buried him in the sand and ran off because he's like, yeah, I done screwed up and they're going to kill me. They don't care if I'm some sort of courtier in Pharaoh's court. And, kind of a prince of Egypt's whim helps add to that. But to me, it's pretty darn clear that Moses knew that he was an Israelite. I know in Prince of Egypt, they make it like stunning, and then he suddenly starts seeing the plight of his people, which is a cool way to do it. Or you have the, just cool masculine energy of in the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston, as he's just like, blood makes poor mortar kind of stuff. Both are really cool, and I get why they made those decisions in each of those shows. But whenever I read, the Exodus narrative about Moses, to me it seems like he knew he was Israelite, even though he was preserved by Pharaoh's daughter. So I think he was raised Egyptian, but he knew he was Hebrew. Anyways, those are my little theories between Daniel and Moses, and now that I've come to this information about Mosiah the First, to me it makes sense. It was through marriage. Anyways, love you lots. Enjoy Disneyland, and well, if you're listening to this after Disneyland, I hope you have fun. We'll see you around.